Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, in the absence of any official figures, researchers believe that at least 383,000 lives have been lost in South Sudan's brutal 5-year civil war. The number's far higher than previous estimates, which put the toll in the tens of thousands. Also, police and gendarmes join in demands on the Ivorian government for payouts. Cash is part of deals struck in the wake of the country's civil war in the early 2000s and has led to army mutinies in the past. And a race for the planet. Solar-powered cars set out on a mammoth 8-day, 5,000-kilometre rush across South Africa. Competitors' vehicles have been built by teams keen to highlight how far green energy options have come. But first, there is no official death toll for South Sudan's civil war. But on Wednesday, researchers said that the number of fatalities linked to the 5-year crisis may be as high as 383,000, perhaps even more. The independent study by the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine estimates that 190,000 of those deaths were violent. The rest were arrived at once factors like population displacement, food insecurity, and the effect the fighting this had on access to medical care were all factored in. Now, fighting broke out in 2013 between forces loyal to President Salva Kiir and fighters supporting his former number 2, Riek Machar. Kiir signed a peace deal with rebel factions just this month, but past agreements have been short-lived. Sam Mednick joins us now with more from Juba. Sam, why is this figure that we're hearing on Wednesday, 383,000, so much greater than any previous estimates?
Well, so counting the dead really hasn't been a priority during the entire conflict. This is really the first comprehensive account of the number of people who have been killed. And it's way greater than what we've been using, the number of 50,000, but really we don't really know. The United Nations has said that it's hard to get to places where fighting has occurred, to access it, to get this information. But experts say that it's really not a justification for not compiling this information. You know, they've done it in other contexts like Darfur, where they have gathered this. So it's really a question of accountability as well for the government, which doesn't want to hold people to account and to have these numbers. And the government said about this report, it really can't confirm or deny if the numbers are accurate.
So what is the significance of these numbers? What's going to be done with them? What can be done with them?
They're extremely significant. I mean, what can be done with them and what will be done with them, it really depends on the political will. Advocacy groups here say that the government really needs to see this as a wake-up call, especially as the peace deal was just signed a couple weeks ago. You know, what does this mean for reconciliation in terms of healing for the victims and the families of these people, as well as humanitarian aid? There's consistently resistance and blocking of access to humanitarian groups to bring aid to millions of displaced people in the country. So this really, the government needs to look at these numbers and see it as a wake-up call. Whether they do or not, though, is yet to be seen.
So, Sam, you've recently come back from opposition-held areas in South Sudan. From what you saw, do you feel that there's much confidence there that the latest efforts to bring about peace are likely to amount to much?
From what I saw when I was in Nial and Unity State, people were really, really skeptical. They keep having images of when Riek Machar came back in 2016 after the last peace deal was signed and everything erupted in chaos months later. So people, right now, they just don't seem to be hopeful for this peace agreement, and they're kind of waiting to see the guns stop firing, the clashes stop. They want the government troops out of their areas. Even opposition soldiers were saying, you know, how can we see ourselves fight along the government army? You know, one guy told me our hearts are still haven't healed from war. So the mood right now is still very, very skeptical.
Thanks very much. Sam Mednick there for us in Juba. Now, 8 soldiers were killed in the north of Burkina Faso on Wednesday. Their convoy reportedly drove over a mine as they headed from Baraboul in Soum province to the town of Djibo. Areas in the north have suffered a string of fatal jihadist attacks since 2015, as extremist fighters started staging cross-border raids from Mali. Other parts of Burkina Faso are also being increasingly targeted. In the centre of the country, at least 60 people have been killed in the capital, Ouagadougou. It's been hit by 3 terror attacks in 2 years. Now, a little over a year ago, Ivory Coast was gripped by military mutinies when thousands of troops, many of whom were former rebels, overran 9 cities in protest over pay and bonuses. Now, some say that they're still owed payouts promised after the end of the country's civil war in the early 2000s. Police and gendarmes were also drafted into service alongside UN forces following the conflict, and they are now joining with these soldiers to raise their own demands for pay. Frank Hersey brings us more from Abidjan.
In 2005, after the Civil War, Ivory Coast was effectively cut in two when a partition was drawn through the middle of the country, dividing north from south. The UN selected 600 police and gendarmes to work alongside UN forces in securing this partition. These officers are now pushing hard to claim what they say they were promised by the authorities at the time. Now, they do say they were paid bonuses of around 4 million francs, that's 6,000 euros, but are still owed a further 12 million francs. And the situation is intensifying as these 600 officers are now joined by 300 soldiers claiming to be from the 8,400. They're the soldiers who were involved in the 2017 mutiny over roughly the same issues. Yet these 300 soldiers claim to have been paid none of the promised bonuses. We spoke to some of those involved who wish to remain anonymous.
We don't want to cause any public disorder, but they need to know there's a limit to our patience, and there's a lot of us. Things could spill over, you understand? It's possible there will be a mutiny. It could happen.
Ivory Coast Prime Minister Amadou Gon Coulibaly says that the recruitment process was different for the police and gendarmes to that of the 8,400 soldiers, and so they don't qualify for the bonuses. He says he remains open to further dialogue and that the Ministries for Defence and the Interior are working to resolve this issue.
Frank Hersey there for us. Now, in neighbouring Mali, at least 15 Tuaregs were killed in clashes with Fulani herdsmen. They reportedly raided the Tuareg campsite in the Menaka region in an attack motivated by inter-ethnic tensions. Islamist militia who seized the country's north in 2012 continue to encourage communal rivalries in a bid to recruit new members. To South Africa now, where the Solar Challenge has begun. It's a 5,000-kilometre race in which all the vehicles are solar-powered. The cars are designed and built entirely by students in a bid to raise awareness about environmental issues. Take a look.
Some of these solar-powered cars look more sophisticated than others. All have been designed and built by university students who come from many different countries: the Netherlands, Switzerland, Japan, China and South Africa. They are taking part in a 5,000-kilometre race in South Africa. The aim is also to raise awareness about advances in solar energy.
The solar cars, it's something that looks futuristic, so who wouldn't want to be part of a team that's dealing with something that would sort of solve a problem such as fuel in future? Because we would want to see us having solar cars just so that you drive to wherever you want to drive to without having to spend money for fuel.
The race lasts 8 days and takes place between Pretoria and Cape Town.
This event in South Africa is considered to be one of the tougher events in the world because it's out on the highway, because it crosses the country. We're going through different climatic zones from north of Johannesburg down to the coast and around the coast to Cape Town. We're going to see a variety of different conditions.
So if you are driving on a motorway in South Africa in the next few days, do not be surprised if you see a small futuristic vehicle in the lane next to you. The final leg of the race takes place on the 30th of September.
Vanarona is a cross between checkers and chess. The complex strategy game's been played in Madagascar since the 14th century. Fans see it as the country's national game, and according to legend, battles for the board have cost losers kingdoms. Take a look.
Where he's going, all 80-year-old Andre needs is a bottle of stones. These and a basic playing board traced out by hand form the basis of the Malagasy game Vanarona. At least 7 centuries old, it remains a popular pastime.
Yes, I drew that. I can't engage in any more physical effort. But Vanarona at least lets me use my brain.
It's a complex game of strategy, with each player aiming to capture their opponent's 22 pieces. Players insist the rewards go beyond just the winning.
Fanarona teaches you to anticipate, to persevere. It gives you strength to face life. It makes you brave.
And now there's Ivorona, the video game. Created here in Madagascar, it's been downloaded over 30,000 times since its launch 4 years ago.
One download in Argentina, one in China, 2 in France, 2 in Germany, 3 in the United States, and I was pleasantly surprised. I feel we're getting closer to our goal when we created eFanarona, which is to make it global.
Farona even featured in the hit action-adventure game series Assassin's Creed in 2012 and 2013. But on the streets of Antananarivo, the ancient form of the game still has its followers, both young and old.
I think I found a potential replacement for my Sudoku obsession. Well, that is it, though, for Iron Africa for now. Thanks very much for joining us. Remember, you can catch more news from the continent and indeed from around the world by checking out our website, www.france24.com. Otherwise, stay watching. More news coming up. Take care.
Ten years after Iceland's economy collapsed, the country is turning the tide. With full employment and high growth, Iceland has little to envy from its European neighbours. After much soul-searching, the country has transformed itself. Today, travellers from the world around are flocking to this small island that sits halfway between Europe and America.
We revisit Iceland and its gender balance changes here on France 24.